So, good afternoon or good morning. I am very pleased in first place to have the opportunity to address you in this impressive conference. And I regret not being able to be there because of the COVID situation. It's not yet, in my case, inviting. I want to thank the organizer, sorry, of the conference on the University Gaston Berger. I see that the conference is a very timely conference, as the dictum goes, because it touches every disciplines in the humanities, social science, the natural science, but also the professional school. And I think it's timing precisely because we are at the moment in which the planet is moving to a change of era. And I will say something at the end about the change of era. What I mean is no longer an era of change where you can modify the changes with something with a prefix new or the prefix post. And I think that the news and the post and the news has been precisely the Trojan horse of Western modernity, newness of everything, starting from the new world. So thank you again. And I will try to do this in 45 minutes as the time has been allowed. I go with the title of this section, that is Planetary Challenge and Opportunity to Review Interdisciplinary African Research. And I will address this issue in three sections. The planetary challenges, and the opportunity to renew the renewal of interdisciplinary research in Africa and in the planet. So let's go with part one, the planetary. You all know better than we in this part of the world that many years ago, apparently, the Homo sapiens sentiens originated in Africa and spread all over the world to the Americas, where I am speaking now. I mean, I'm speaking from the United States, but I am coming from the South, from Argentina. And as we know, in the Americas, after 1500, or the start of 1500, 1492, the population of the Americas came from the Atlantic, no longer from the Pacific. First, the European, I don't know, the European conqueror and invaders, whatever you want to call it, that then were in charge of the massive trade of African human beings. So that is one way to start the question of the planetary. The other moment is when the planetary the image of the planet that we have today is the dominant image that came from Herodotus, but that was, we don't see this map anymore. But what is still in our imaginary is this version of Herodotus map from the Latin Middle Ages, from the Western Christianity, known as the T-in-O map. And this map, as you may know, has been drawn first with Asia on top, because was not the north and the magnetic compass that kind of determined the orientation, but the orientation, the orient, was oriented by the sunrise and the sunset. But also Asia was at that time known, that was the larger of the three continents. Europe not necessarily was as large as Africa, but is how it appears. But what's important here is also that the three continents were related to the three Noah son. So Sem was assigned to Asia. Shem, who was the bad son of Noah, was assigned to Africa, and Japheth, who was the expansion, the future, was assigned to Europe. So the question of Africa in the Western imaginary that after 1500 became hegemonic and dominant goes back to Christianity. So what happened with this, at the time of the TNO map was made, there were other, what we call today, civilization. The Aztecs in Mexico, the Chinese, and all of these civilization, of course, were kind of organized around what is being called the Omphalos syndrome. I mean, each civilization was the center of the world of the planet. I won't go into detail here. The only things that I am interested is that at the time that the TNO map was drawn, was just one of many of various civilization in the planet, but didn't have, of course, the dominant role, the hegemonic that will become in the 16th century, the hegemonic role that will become evident in the 16th century. So at that time also, we have the map, the content, all these are kind of contemporary, right? So we have the map of Mohammed al-Idrisi. What is interested in this map, if you are not familiar with this map yet, you will see that it's difficult to know what is what here. If you are not familiar with the map and I tell you that this is the Mediterranean, you will say, no, how come? Because we got used to see the Mediterranean. This is al-Idrisi map upside down. We are used to see the Mediterranean on the left. So now we can see Europe, we can see Africa, we can see Asia, and of course, we cannot see yet America. So in the 16th century, that is Abraham Ortelius, 1570, was this, for the first time in the history of humankind, the distribution of water masses and land masses was seen not just in this kind of horizontal map, but also in the planisphere, in the hemisphere, the kind of the round planisphere. Well, the dimension were not according to technological and mathematical calculation that we kind of develop later on, but that is basically what we still see today. And what we see there is the Atlantic in the center, right? And The Atlantic in the center, and of course, close to the Atlantic was Rome. But then in the 19th century, Rome was displaced, and we have the Greenwich meridian. So the kind of center. So there are two things I want to kind of point out in this map in relation to the planetary situation we have today. This kind of also forgotten memory, if I can put it in this way. And one is that the Atlantic became the center in the 16th century, displacing the role of that the Mediterranean had in previous century, and the Mediterranean has displaced the Indic Ocean that had before. And now we are moving to the Pacific. I don't have here an actual map of Asia, but in the actual map of Asia, and that comes from the 16th century, from the drawing of the Jesuit Matthew Ricci, the center of the flat map is the Pacific and not the Atlantic. And now again, in this change of era, in the planetary change of era, this is important that there is a shift to the Eastern Hemisphere, and the shift seems to be taking place in every area of human experience, in politics, in economy, in technology, in culture, in the humanities, etc., etc. So this is the first idea. I will come back on the change of era, but this is the first sign that the shifting. And as Mahbubani said, Kishore Mahbubani said many years ago, 2008, the irreversible shift to the Eastern Hemisphere. So that, of course, as you know today, is already affecting Africa because of China's inversion in the continent, and it's also changing the situation of the South America, because the South American now is kind of in between. And if you look at America now, I mean, South America and the America were made out of, after 1500, of the Atlantic. But now, well, you see, the Pacific is a corridor to what we call East Asia, which indeed is West Asia if you look at it from here. So that is one aspect that I want to underline of this map. The second is, how can you see 4 continents? Well, because we have 3. So of all the kind of the maps, put it that way, coexisting by the 1500, is this map that is behind, implied in the Ortelius. And in this map, what happened, it disappeared, the 4 continents appear. So we have 3 continents here, but we have 4 continents here, and we see 4 continents again, because the map, the global map in the 16th century were drawn by Western Christian, not necessarily believers, but Western Christian in the sense that Western theology was the kind of the master frame of knowledge, whether you are believer or not. Theology was the epistemology of the time. So when Hegel in the 18th, I mean, in the lesson of universal history, the philosophy of history, that the various lessons that he delivered between 1822 and 1831. Well, you know very well, Africa is out of history. The future of history is North America. At the time when England and France and Germany are kind of began to dominate the imaginary of the modern Western or the Western modernity. United States is the future, is already the US revolution have taken place 40, 50 years before Hegel was writing this, while South America have a destiny more or less like Africa. Was not the question of race, as we call it today, racialization in terms of religion and colors, but was racialization in terms of barbarism. So in South America, there was no much hope for Hegel because it was a kind of fight and revolution and fight against caudillos, etc., etc. So the future was in United States, and as Hegel said, well, since this is the future, I will not talk about this. I will talk about the past and the present. And since Africa is out of history, I won't talk about Africa either. Okay, so I should have put this before, but that is what I was trying to explain, that underneath this map, the world map is the Christian map. So let's now go to part 2. The planetary challenge. So not just the planetary, but what the challenges are today. So what I was talking about, well, there is a long history, of course, before 1500, but the world order we inhabit today, the imaginary that inhabit us today, the knowledge, the hegemonic knowledge, I'm not talking about, I'm talking about local knowledge of Europe, the North Atlantic that became planetary. I am not talking about yet about the local knowledge that has been destitute, silenced, or destituted in terms of they were kind of folklore or belief, etc. But theology, science, and philosophy from the 1600 to the 1800 set up the stage of not only of the structure of knowledge, but the imaginary of reality. There is a lot of, I mean, there is always conflicts of interpretation between what reality is or is not, but all of conflict of interpretation are within the same frame. And that frame kind of destitute all other languages, all other knowledge, all other praxis of living, destituted in a different way, kind of demonizing or silence or not just paying attention. So that was the era of change between 1500 and 2000, and the era of changes within the same frame. And that frame constituted itself as Western modernity as an interiority. And to constitute itself as interiority, it has to invent the exteriority. So there is no outside of what we call the colonial metric of power, because the exteriority is the necessary invention of interiority to build itself as interiority. And also, you cannot manage or control what is outside, but you can control and manage the exteriority because you have made the exteriority. And that's what we saw in the map. I think that the map is the most eloquent example of what I'm trying to say. So that the era exchange was dominated by universality in epistemology and aesthetic. Epistemology, all kind of what we call today the science, natural science, humanity, social science, but also the professional school. The professional school that are more technical, but this kind of technicity of the professional school, be law, medicine, engineer, computer science, are kind of have been derived from epistemology. And aesthetic still kind of regulates the taste, our taste, and also regulate the view of the artist that is related to aesthetic as a special person, a genius or something like that. And that legacy comes from Kant and Hegel. But what is important in epistemology and aesthetics that they manage also the subjectivity. Who control knowledge, control the subject. And who control money, control knowledge. And so since the 16th century, the connection between what we call today capitalist economy and science and philosophy and aesthetics are part of the same packages. And this is the era of universality, of North Atlantic abstract universal, as Michel Roth-Trujillo put it in a very kind of eloquent way. And parallel or embedded in the universality of knowledge that includes, of course, political theory and political economy, was the unipolar organization of the interstate system. I put international because international seems to me that it's not the right, proper name, because we connect to each other and we don't have many problems, for us many problems. But the interstate planetary system is where the issues, the conflicts, the disputes are taking place, and most of the time, we the people, as the dictum goes, we don't have much say. So the Eurocentered and North Atlantic era of hegemonic and dominance in knowledge was politics, economy, and subjectivity aesthetics. What I mean, the era of changes is the Eurocentered and North Atlantic era of hegemonic dominance, that it seems to be closing. And that is the question of the challenges that we have today. Indeed, it's not a transition. I won't say this is a transition, because the transition is within the era of changes, always transition from this to that within the same. I will say today that more than a transition, we are living an explosion where the different parts of the planets are kind of erupting like the volcanoes that have been quiet for a number of, not necessarily quiet, but didn't have the possibility they have today to kind of really send the lava over the mouth of the volcano. And that is what I think we are today. We are in the change of era. And in the change of era, what we are seeing already in the interstate planetary system is the becoming of a multipolar world order. And much of the conflict we are seeing today, and Ukraine is the most present and dramatic, perhaps because of the escalation. The change of era and the opening of a multipolarity create this kind of tension because the North Atlantic is not ready to accept the upcoming multipolarity in the interstate system. So what we see with China and Russia, and again, Ukraine is a clear example, is the effort to maintain unipolarity. And maintaining unipolarity is at the same time maintaining universality of knowledge. So multipolarity, I call multipolarity in the interstate planetary system de-Westernization. And pluriversality in nociology and aesthesis, I call it decoloniality. And I will say a little bit more about nociology and aesthesis. But I want to make clear that the decolonial and the de-Western have something in common, and they are contributing to the change of era. But while de-Westernization are a state-led project, decoloniality are projects led by the political society. And the political society is following Chatterjee. The political society is this part, the active part of the population, or the active part of the civil society, if you want to use this kind of liberal concept of liberal society. I mean, civic society and the state. Yeah, well, yes, this is kind of part two that prepare us to enter into part three. And in part three, I will address the question of renew interdisciplinary research, renew interdisciplinary African research, as the title of the session goes, or I will invite you to think to engage in undisciplined investigation, or even better, perhaps both. So, because in the change of era, we are not necessarily, we don't have necessarily to maintain the classic binary opposition of Western modernity that started, of course, before that with Aristotle logic and also with Christianity, where you is either or as George Bush said before the invasion of Iraq, you are with me or you are with my enemies. And I will say at this point, decolonially, we are neither with you nor with your enemy. And we are seeing that in de-Westernization, the same logic seems to be applied. The position of China now in relation to Ukraine is neither nor. China is refusing to enter into the binary opposition in spite of the kind of the lobby that the United States and the European Union are trying to, are trying to convince them to take their side in relation to Russia. And there are many, many reasons, of course, that as we know, that why China will not take position against Russia. There are a lot of political, economic reasons. On top of that, the fact that China is kind of constantly harassed by the West. But I would say also that there is a less talked about and less visible reason why China is taking this kind of position of neutrality, because from Tianxia, all under heaven, and the Chinese cosmology, which is not Western cosmology based on the binary opposition. In Chinese cosmology, we have the yin and the yang. And the yin and the yang is not the yin versus opposed to the yang. They are complementary. So I think that this is one reason that is not being pronounced by Xi Jinping or the Minister of Foreign Relations, but it's being invoked by many philosophers and political theorists who are elaborating on the becoming mutation of the world order into multipolarity, rethinking and revisiting Tianxia. Not, of course, to go to the past, but as they are saying, where there is no reason today that we continue to have a world order that came into being with the emergence of the nation state and after was failure. The nation state is, they say, have two problems. One, that the nation state don't care for human being, but care from the national. And we see it every day with immigrants and refugees. And the other is that there is a difficult contradiction to solve in the nation state, that the nation state are built based on national security and national interest. And based on national security and national interest and the binary opposition, the outcome is necessarily the zero-sum game. And that is what the Chinese are rejecting. And what they are proposing is that everything has to be resolved by conversation and dialogue, and not by forcing other states to do what we would like them to do. Well, you can say that is the politic of the PC in China, and the intellectuals who are doing this kind of the political theories that are doing this investigation are, of course, in alliance or contributing to the political philosophy of the state. Yes, of course. And that is what I mean when we read The World Order by Henry Kissinger. Kissinger is a political theorist from Harvard, but we know that he had a prominent position in the government, and he is advisor of president. So we are here into a very interesting combination between de-Westernization in international relations, but also de-Westernization in political theory. While when we look at Kissinger and Brezhnev and what they are proposing are kind of re-Westernization of Western international relations. They understand, especially Kissinger in the last book, one of the last book, The World Order, that things have changed, that United States have made mistakes that had to be corrected, but the world order needs one leader, and that leader has to be United States. Well, that is one view. One view, on the one hand, that the world needs a leader. Does it? And the second is another kind of discussion. If the world needs a leader, that has to be United States. But for me, at this point, the most important question to ask is whether the world order needs one state that leads and there cannot be a kind of multipolar world order. So multipolarity doesn't presuppose one state, a leading state. While unipolarity means, demands demands a state that leads. So the question is, I went too quick here, let's go here, to renew interdisciplinary or indisciplined, I said. So to address these issues, I will introduce a couple of concepts. When I talked before about interiority and exteriority is the making, the fabrication of interiority. Or as Fanon say, I mean, when the white describe the black, in that the black is the exteriority, but it's the exteriority made in the process of made whiteness as a point of reference. So that happened in all order of knowledge and of course in the interstate system. So to overcome, the question we have now is to overcome the epistemic and ontological colonial and imperial differences. I'm sorry for the typo. So what do I mean by that? Epistemic and ontological difference means that since the 16th century, the barbarians, that kind of in the vocabulary of the time, in the vocabulary of the barbarian were the kind of the seed for what become more and more systematized races, but races not just that affect people, races that affect regions, planets of the world, and affects religions. So there is a racialization across the board, and the racialization across the board consists is not ontic, it's ontological, is a fabrication, is someone, institution, and actors and languages that control knowledge and have the privilege to decide, to describe, to say that there are other people who are epistemically deficient because they are ontologically inferior. And that is the colonial difference. The colonial difference was kind of emerged in the 16th century, basically in the Christian theology in relation to indigenous in the American and African. So it was not just cultural difference, it was kind of colonial difference in the sense that indigenous and African were considered lesser human beings, and lesser human beings, of course, are epistemically deficient. And there are texts that kind of can be invoked. And I call imperial difference built on the epistemic and on the colonial difference, the difference that has been created also in the 16th century, both by the dominance of epistemic theology and the impact and the influence that epistemic theology has on the state, the monarchic state. So at that time, the imperial difference was created in relation to the Ottoman Sultanate. The Ottoman had to be recognized as civilized, as sophisticated kind of society, but they had the wrong guide. So the imperial difference has been projected to places that could not be colonized by settler colonialism, like was in the America, and was in Africa by the West since after the Berlin Conference. We know that the Ottoman have extended what today we call Maghreb. So the imperial difference is very important in the interstate system today, because it's the imperial difference that is motivating the conflict between the United States, Russia, and China. Russia was never colonized by certain colonialism. China the same, but the collapse of the Soviet Union and in China before the Opium War made them subject to coloniality. So they were not colonized, but they didn't escape coloniality. And coloniality, by coloniality I mean the underlying logic of all Western colonialism. So after the end of colonialism in the Americas, and after the end of colonialism in Africa and Asia during the Cold War, coloniality didn't end. Coloniality persisted in what we call today internal colonialism in Africa, Asia, but also in the Americas, where the nation state were created in the 19th century. So let me say one more thing about racialization of languages, racialization of region, racialization of people, racialization of states, because a democratic authoritarian, for example, works within the kind of the colonial and imperial difference. But one important thing here that has to be into the picture is the racialization of the earth, the racialization of the cosmic living energies of earth that have been identified with one single noun, nature, and nature was separated from us, and nature, after Bacon, is something that is there for humans to kind of know it and dominate it. Well, I have 5 minutes, so I will kind of close here. So what the question now is, the interdisciplinary or undisciplinary research of both is have in common, whether we go with the interdisciplinary or undisciplinary, the politics and ethics of investigation. So the politics of ethics of investigation could be decolonial or could be the Western. So decolonial, as I said before, is in the hands of the political society, not of the state. While the Western, there are projects that are being handled by the state. How or if these two kind of projects can cooperate or not, that is a question that is an open question at this moment. But I would like to make a very clear distinction between decoloniality as a political project of the active part of the population and the Westernization as a led project that, of course, needs investigation. No? So interdisciplinary research presuppose that the disciplines are maintained. And what has to be done is, and it's already being done and has been formulated. For example, I have an example now, Syed Farid Alatas in Singapore, but he's a Muslim Malaysian who is trying to decolonize sociology. And by decolonizing sociology, what he means is to maintain sociology, but at the same time, reformulate, reconstitute sociology from the point of view, from the perspective, the memories and the experience of Muslims and Southeast Asia. So there is no need, so he mentioned Ibn Khaldun and Syed Nursi and Jose Rizal as equivalent to Durkheim, Marx, etc. So that is one possibility of the renewing research, interdisciplinary research. Undisciplinary research, I will say that we have to, and I have been proposing that, to engage in gnosiological reconstitution of epistemology and aesthetic reconstitution of aesthetics. Instead of gnosiological and aesthetic, you can use other terms. What I mean here is that epistemology and aesthetics limited the condition and the investigation of the condition of knowledge to what Aristotle called episteme. And aesthetic is part of that episteme that emerged in the 18th century. And Kant and Hegel are kind of the founder of this modern version of aesthetics, is part of this epistemological configuration of knowledge and sensing and feeling, etc. So gnosiology, and I here would like to invoke Valentine Mudimbe, who in the invention of Africa reintroduced the concept of gnosis, because he began to realize that it was not adequate to talk about African knowledge and way of knowing as philosophy, because philosophy was a way of knowing and knowledge that had been imported and imported from Europe. So gnosiology means to kind of to pay attention to other way of knowing, other knowledge and other way of knowing, and that will allow us to reconstitute epistemology. So gnosis, the difference between episteme and doxa. Episteme was a kind of rational knowledge, doxa was opinion, and gnosis was knowledge in general. I would say that doxa and episteme are two manifestations of gnosis. So the reconstitution, the gnosiological reconstitution of epistemology allow us to do serious and relevant investigation, reconstituting epistemology, meaning reducing epistemology to its own well-deserved side, but no longer be universal. So gnosiological reconstitution take us toward the pluriversal and the linking from the universal. And aesthetic, Aristotle didn't use aesthesis in his Poetics. He used it, but not a central concept like poiesis, mimesis, and catharsis. But he uses in the Anima. And in the Anima is a treatise about subjectivity. So the question of the reconstitution of aesthetics through aesthesis, or the aesthetic reconstitution of aesthetics, means to open up the subjectivity to all areas of experience and not just kind of limited and managed and controlled in the sphere of art. So that is what I have to propose regarding the theme of this session. So I hope that I try to be as clear as possible in 45 minutes. And I hope that whatever is not clear and of interest, we can have a conversation in the 15 or half an hour that we have left. So thank you very much for your attention.